Aristotle's Poetics. So the first thorough articulation of what's going on in tragedy, and has really shaped not just our interpretations of tragedy, but literary theory about how we interpret a lot of genres ever since Aristotle's work. Okay, so I say work, but it's probably consists of course notes, maybe from students. It's fairly rough in places. Um, so they're course notes from the 330s BCE, and the title is Poetics, or the art of whatever the verb poein means. Okay, um, and broadly, poein means to do or make, akin to faire in French or mach in German. Narrowly, it would mean poetry, the art of making or the art of poetry. So it could be translated as the art of poetry. But Aristotle underscores within it how poein is synonymous with the pratine, which is action. So it's also the art of action. In a way, the art of poetry is also about the art of action. Um, so too, we have to keep in mind Aristotle's political and ethical philosophy. So for Aristotle, actions have ends or purposes, and the end or telos of the soul, for instance, is happiness, which is actualized in virtuous action. The activity itself is not necessarily good. For instance, the virtue of courage may require killing others in war. So the act of killing someone is not what is virtuous. It's only made good as an action seen in the larger context of the whole, its purpose, its end, and we only see that via reflection and imagination. Okay, so we can see the actions of Hector and Achilles, for instance, as wholes because of Homer. Because of Homer's work as a poet, he's able to bring that forth. And so we could say that poetry is this imitation of an action such that the whole and the completeness of the action is seen. And the Greek word for imitation is mimesis, and it allows an action to arise as a whole rather than as a random series of occurrences with no beginning or end. And we see this in imaginative literature, this type of imitation, but also in our own actions, we can see them as emulations of or imitations of what we think would be an imagined end. Okay, so that art of poetry is important both for action and poetry in a narrow sense. Aristotle says that poetry is representation, mimesis, with the types of poetry differentiated by the media they use, so maybe rhythm, song, verse, the objects, whether it's a representation of, like the object of representation is a good character or a bad. How, the manner of representation, are you using narrative or drama? So narrative, I say, so and so went down to the store, he bought this, he ran into so and so, they had a conflict. So that's a narrator, someone standing outside telling of the events. In drama, we see a direct representation of that. We wouldn't have a narrator saying he went to the store. In drama, we have a direct mimesis where so and so is going down to the store. An actor is showing us going down the store. Another actor comes along and they have a conflict. So poetry is both natural and pleasurable. Humans naturally represent and learn from this. And there is a pleasure and education in seeing the form. So there's thus even a pleasure in seeing something tragic. Okay. So there's pleasure and education in seeing the form, seeing the wholeness of the action in relation to a whole. So for Aristotle, the highest manifestation of poetic imitation is tragedy. And he comes to the following, I'd say, to summarize his essential definition of tragedy: a representation of a serious, complete action in itself of a certain magnitude with embellished speech. So it's not prose, it's not, let's say, ordinary run-of-the-day speech with separate elements, verse and song, dramatic, not narrated. Again, not prose, it's not a novel. Arouses pity and fear to affect the catharsis of those emotions. So we'll talk about that in a second. Tragedy consists of the following elements: plot. For him, that plot's most important, which is the structure action. So a story can be any series of events, but a plot, you may want to start over here, and maybe then you want to go back and fill in the blanks in the past. And then by structuring it in that way, the artist is able to show that wholeness of the action, right? So plot, for that reason, I think is so crucial for Aristotle. Then character, then thought. Let's say the intentions or different motivations of the characters and the author. Diction, the word choice. Song, let's say the poetic elements, and spectacle. Plot should imitate a single action as a whole, so he does not like episodic plots. And it progresses through a tragic error, a hamartia, a reversal, a peripeteia, is a change of action to its opposite. So the messenger speech in Oedipus the King is an example where things are going one way, and then Oedipus discovers that his whole identity is different, and it reverses his fortune from great man to scourge of the city. Recognition, so there's this anagnoresis, a movement from agnoia, not knowing, to gnosis, ignorance to knowledge. And the realization of the hero, that's what this anagnoresis is it's a recognition often of who they really are. The Oedipus the King example is a good one. And for Aristotle, the best ones are where the peripeteia and the anagnoresis occur at the same time. And again, Oedipus the King is his example. So the goal of the tragic representation is arousing pity and fear to the effect that a catharsis of these emotions. So we mentioned that before. So catharsis, there's a lot of critical ink spilled on trying to fully understand what this concept means, but I think we could see it as a way of, well, one way of thinking about it is, we have pity and fear building up, and we need, like, let's say, a release valve, and we're able to arouse pity and fear and have them directed to this action that is presented for us, so that we can have them within a certain measure as we go about our daily lives. Okay, so that's one way of thinking about the catharsis, as a bringing into measure of those emotions through having them directed at this work of art. So there I'll end